Go.
Hi, I'm Ethan Schill.
Hi, I'm Jack Cavanaugh, and this is Tom Cavanaugh, and our camera guy is Leo Tierney.
Okay. So, just to start off, how was your early life, like your childhood when you were growing up in Milwaukee?
We grew up out in Wauwatosa. Actually, it was Christ King Parish. And when we moved into our house, there were no sidewalks. In fact, there still aren't any sidewalks out there because it was like the end of the world. It was 106th and Garfield, which is around Mayfair. Anyway, we went to Christ King. I had 5 brothers and 2 sisters. I'm the 6th out of 8, so there was a lot of fun stuff that went on, a lot of infighting, brothers and mostly. But we had a good time. We went to Christ King grade school. I played football and actually basketball in grade school. I didn't play basketball any after grade school, and baseball. And then I came to Marquette, and I graduated in 1969. My older brother, Mike, graduated in 1960. He went here. Interesting fact, actually, is that my wife's brothers all went to Marquette High, and her father went to Marquette High. So Jack is like 3rd, 4th generation.
So did any of your brothers?
Sealmans. And then there were a lot of cousins because of my family that actually went here, and they had different names, but they were all related. Obviously, they're the Matthews, the Sealmans, like I said.
How was the dynamic growing up with a lot of brothers and sisters? Did you guys all get along? How did the fights kind of play out?
Well, it was just kind of infighting. We always had a kind of a one rule that you would never hit someone in the face because, it would show. But it was always usually, you almost never challenged the older guy. You just kind of stuck your ground, and I was in the middle, so I was always kind of either fighting with someone or fighting against someone. But it was all, it wasn't like fighting like, you'd get mad at that little time, and then that would be over with. And but it was good to have all the brothers and sisters. I noticed in our family, if you look as it got further down the line, my youngest brother and my second youngest brother, Jeff, is in the Hall of Fame here, actually, at Marquette. And my youngest brother, Jimmy, he started a quarterback for the team, for the football team. So did Jeff, my other brother. So I think they got better as that went along, and I think it's because they were on the bottom, and we were always either chasing them or else having them play with us, and we were bigger, and they got better because they played more. So
you talk about going to Christ King. Did all of your brothers and sisters go to Christ King?
They all went there. We didn't end up there immediately. In fact, my oldest brother Mike was there just for his 8th grade. But everyone graduated from Christ King. When we were there at Christ King, the church was in the basement. They didn't have a church. They didn't have a gym. And it was, like I said, it was so far west at the time. There wasn't anything further west than that. There wasn't St. Joe's or any of those parishes because no one had moved out that far. And I also, the area we lived in right now, if you look at that, the Highway 100 and North Avenue, is the second busiest intersection in the city of Milwaukee. When we moved in there, the Highway 100 was called Lover's Lane. It had 2 lanes, and it was trees covered all over. So there were no buildings, there was no Mayfair. Mayfair was a farm. So the area was just developing. And I had to, grade school, we all got bused to Christ King because it was pretty far. Christ King was on 92nd and Center, and we were on 106th and Garfield, which is around North Avenue. But then when we went to Marquette High, I actually hitchhiked to school every day, which was interesting, and home. But back then, hitchhiking was something you did. In fact, if you had a Marquette High jacket on, people were more willing to pick you up because they would say, oh, he's, I know he goes to a good school or whatever,
So is that just like a trust system, just like with this hitchhiking to and from school every day?
Yeah, it was. I mean, nowadays you'd never do that, but things were a little different back then. And it was an accepted thing, it wasn't like somebody would go, what are you doing, In fact, there were a lot of times there'd be 20 guys hitchhiking on Wisconsin Avenue and 35th Street trying to go west, or the other guys were going east or wherever they'd go.
So would you guys carpool? Carpool in a way when you hitchhiking?
Yeah, later on we would carpool. The problem what I had is because I was so far out, no one was out there. So there's now Jack has it a little easier because his dad asks to come down here every day. But think about it, how you guys get to school every day. I mean, that's something that's, you probably figure out, all right, we got to leave now. And if you're hitchhiking, you don't know. So, and you got to get here, obviously, in time for school. So,
so after Christ King, you went to Marquette High. How did your relationship with your parents develop through that time?
Well, my parents, when you had 8 kids and they were working, my dad was a salesman, he was always working. My mom didn't work until maybe once I was into high school, then she started working. So there were times where my older brothers and sisters actually, watched us. And they were almost like the parents for a while. But we got along very well. My dad loved to go to sports, sporting events and stuff like that. And he would always go to the Marquette games when we were playing. And then he would just go to, he would stop if there were a tournament, high school tournament basketball game at Tosa East. He'd stop and just go to the game because he loved high school sports. So we always got along pretty well.
What was so you got into Marquette High. What is your first impression of the school?
I had thought it was going to be a little bit different in that going from Christ King to Marquette, I thought I would keep a lot of my grade school friends once I got to Marquette. And I was always still friends with them, but I think most of my friends came after I started at Marquette. And a lot of them were, either football players or baseball players or teams I was on, or at the time at Marquette, they had houses that you would take a test to get in, and then you would be assigned a group, like group 1, group 2, group 3, and that's where your classes were geared for each group. And the smartest group was group 1, and then got to group 5, and then there were houses 3 houses after that. A lot of my friends didn't do all that well on the tests, so they had to go to summer school, kind of like a remedial thing, in order to get into Marquette. So they actually kind of got to know each other before school even started. And I think because of playing football, I got to know some of the guys before school started, which kind of helped because, you come as a freshman and, you're looking around at all these people, you don't know any of them. And so it's just nice to be able to say hello to someone or know that someone's there. I think it's a good thing now that they don't have the houses. I think that was a little bit, it kind of made people that were maybe in between either not work as hard because, I'm only in group 5, I'm never going to go higher, or the guys in group 1 were real smart, they were, so I think it's better that you just combine everybody a little bit so that you get a combination of all different types of people in your classes and stuff like that.
How did you end up spending that summer where you weren't in summer school and all your friends were in summer school?
I was always working. I had to work to get, to come to Marquette because we didn't have a whole lot of money. In fact, we wouldn't been able to pay for the tuition, but Marquette High, you could pay what you could, and then Marquette High filled in on the rest, and they allowed me to go. But at the time, what you had to do if you were doing that is you had to work at the school. So I worked, like I served in the cafeteria. I worked at the bookstore. That was one of my main ones, working at the bookstore. And they used to have a Jesuit residence here where the Jesuits lived. And I would have to work there on Saturdays and Sundays and serve breakfast or lunch to these guys, to the priests, which was kind of weird, but it also allowed me to meet all the teachers. And
do you have any interesting experiences with the priests? At the
some of them it was a little strange. Some of them had, you're thinking of Jesuits and, vow of poverty and everything else. Well, some of them had their poached eggs just right, and they had to be, they had a very nice kitchen anyway, so they always ate pretty well. And but there was bantering that goes on, and I don't think students get to see it, but I used to see it because I was working with all of them working. And, every once in a while they'd say, "Oh, did you see so and so?" Or they'd be talking about some of the students or what happened. And but they were really mostly pretty good. Everyone was pretty nice to us. But like I said, I couldn't have gone to Marquette if they didn't have the money, that they would allow people to. And then now, when I read all this stuff, it sounds as though there's like somewhere around 26% of the school gets financial aid, and when you see how much it costs for you guys to go here, you can see why.
How was your experience different from the kids who had a little bit more money?
I think there was some, a little bit of, not lowering yourself, but, you were working and they were, if you worked in the cafeteria, they would say, "Here, I want this, so you had to serve them a little bit. Or in the bookstore, it was more like just talking back and forth. Someone would come up and need a book, and you'd go and, just, there wasn't any problems there. But working in the kitchen and working in areas like that kind of was something that, oh yeah, he's doing that. And everyone kind of knew that, you couldn't afford it, and that's why you were working. So it didn't really bother me at all. But I think back then it was a bigger deal. There were more students too, and there was a waiting list to get in. So I think at when I was here, I think there were like 1,200 to 1,400 students. Now I think you guys are at 900 or 1,000, somewhere on there. And the tests was, the tests were pretty hard to get in, and that's how they rated you. That's how they rated where you fit into your classes. So, someone had a bad test, they were like stuck in a class that, they adjusted after a while. After your report cards came, then they'd say, well, you can go up and down a little bit. But usually after, the first year, you were pretty much, this is the house you're in, and now you guys kind of do it according to what you do, right? I mean, chess club or whatever, there's certain homerooms that are that way. I'm kind of rambling here, I guess, but our thing was at Marquette, you had to go to church every day, and that's where they took attendance. So if you weren't in your pew, if you were sitting someplace else, you were marked absent for the day, because that's how they took attendance. The homerooms were all alphabetical. The lockers were all alphabetical. I think we had maybe different guidelines as far as what you had to wear, how long your hair could be, facial hair, things like that. But it was a lot different then than now with what you have here. And I remember a funny story. This is about your dad. I took him in 8th grade, I took him down here to show him, and I never pushed going to Marquette. First of all, I had 4 boys, so I didn't want to push it too much, but so he came through and we walked through the school, and he's looking at the school and he goes, well, they don't have a gym. They didn't have a formal gym back then. They had an old gym. They didn't have computer labs. They didn't have all this stuff. And your dad asked me, well, why is this such a good school? I said, well, it's more than the stuff that they have. It's the teachers and it's camaraderie and what it is for you to go to Marquette High and live in the city of Milwaukee. I think it's a big deal when you notice, if you, not so much now, but let's say 10 years ago, your mayor was from Marquette High, your sheriff was from Marquette High, your district attorney was from Marquette High. For whatever reason, people that go to Marquette kind of stay within the city more than other cities. And so I think it's a real advantage.
Talk about playing football and baseball. And how was your experience playing sports against other schools and here?
It was always pretty competitive. I think the sports back then, it was different because it was only the private schools. We only played the private schools. They didn't have the public schools involved, they had their own. And I think you can kind of see now how different it is and how hard it is to get to state when you're talking about public schools and all the different ones. Because when they look at Division I schools and they say, well, they've got 3,000 students, you think, oh, that's a lot. Well, Marquette High would actually be about 2,500 students, but there's no girls, so that's how the difference is. I think playing sports at Marquette, it probably hasn't changed much. I think you guys, have the same crowds and everything else. We actually, when we were here, we didn't play at, Hart Park. We played at Marquette Stadium. It used to be down below, I don't know, they tore it down. And we used to practice down There's 2 fields down just before the valley. So we would walk to practice every day. We would get obviously bused to the different schools when we played them. So, but I think football was the major sport. Baseball kind of got a little less attention. Not many people came to the games, you know. But it was still a big deal to be on the team. So I'm glad I played. I think it really helped. I mean, it was something I enjoyed, and I think I have a lot of memories, a lot of close friends from it too.
So, being like a private high school, would there be like any, like would these public high schools like verbally like attack you guys, like they like insult you for being like, oh, you're a rich kid, you went to this?
No, you know, it's funny because back when we were in high school, it wasn't so much that it was collegiate and greasers. And the greasers greased their hair back and up and wore kind of maybe boots, you know, with heels on it. And the collegiate would have the longer hair, they'd wear penny loafers, and they would wear, you know, stuff that we had to wear at Marquette every day because you had to wear, you know, cuffed pants and all this stuff. So anyway, it was a little different back then as far as the grouping, and it was a little bit of, you know, jocks and, you know, study guys and stuff like that, but not so much at Marquette. But you know, we would have what they don't have now is CYO dances, and that's you'd go to different dances, and then there would be groups of people, and there'd be actual physical fights against with these people. I mean, it was a strange situation, I guess. But it wasn't so much public or private school, you know. And we played some, like we scrimmaged some of the public schools, you know, like Tosa West and East, and sometimes different schools like that. And because you had so many different areas and parishes and everything else covered that came to Marquette, someone else knew somebody from the other schools, you know, invariably, even if they were in the public schools. So sooner or later, you'd end up knowing them, and but we didn't. There wasn't much interaction between schools. I mean, if you were at Marquette, your friends were Marquette. You didn't, you know, you didn't even hang out with ours. Well, now it would be Jordan. Back then it was Jordan, but Jordan's closed. Pius is still open, but you never were friends with Pius people. But you mostly stayed within your own school. So.
After high school, you went on to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
Yeah.
How was that transition? I know you started a business. How did that go?
Well, like I had said, actually during high school, but also during college, I had to work all the time during college, and the cost of UWM was actually a little bit less than Marquette, but I still had to work to pay for it, and so I lived around. I rented an apartment down around UWM, and I lived down there year round. And I worked year round, and it was a little different for me because while I was going to school and while I was working, we ended up starting a business. It was a painting business, and it was new to the area, and it was a different type of painting. It was electrostatic painting. So I didn't really go to college to get a degree so I could get a job, because I had a job because I was working for my own company. So I kind of went to school for 2 reasons. One, to stay out of the war, Vietnam, and 2, just to learn. And it was fun. It was something different, I mean, to go to school and just take something because it was interesting was a lot different than, I got to get this class in. It's one of my prerogative, or one that I have to have. So I don't know. I kind of enjoyed college, and I stayed a long time and never graduated. So.
How you mentioned the Vietnam War. What were your feelings around the war? Did you participate in any?
There was demonstrations going on. I was against the war, totally against the war. I did go into some marches. I didn't do as much as a lot of other people, mainly because at UWM it was more of a commuter school. There weren't a lot of dorms. There weren't a lot of kids just there at campus. So Madison had more of the protests while we were in school, and then there was a bombing, I think in 70 or I think it was 70. In Madison, and that kind of cooled everything down as far as protesting goes. But we actually ended up.
Hold on.
Sure.
Wait. Cut that.
Okay, we actually ended up. They closed the school and they allowed. This was my freshman year. Yeah, I think it was freshman year. They allowed you to self-grade yourself. So you could put any grade you want at the end. This was the second semester of my freshman year. So they stopped classes because of all the protesting, and they didn't want to actually harm the people that were protesting and not going to school. So they said, all right, we're stopping classes. These credits will count, and you can put in your honest grade. So that's what people did by second semester of freshman year.
What did you end up giving yourself?
I didn't give myself all A's, no, but pretty close. It was just a different time. Things were really different. We had gone through a lot of racial tensions before that. In '67, the Black Panthers came about. There was a whole, the entire city of Milwaukee was shut down for over a week. If you were driving on the street in Wauwatosa, you were pulled over. If you were black driving on the street in Wauwatosa, you were definitely pulled over. And it was just a terrible situation, I think, as far as what was going on throughout this whole time. And it almost got to the point where it was like the younger people against the older people. And then it got to the point with the war where people realized that it really wasn't something that everyone wanted or shouldn't be in. And then it switched over to a point where it affected elections and, everything. But the Vietnam War was a point of contention that changed, I think, a lot of lives, And I had a couple of friends that went. A couple died. A couple came back and were never the same. I stayed out of school a semester and was immediately drafted. And I had to go in for a physical, a pre-induction physical, which I flunked. And so I stayed out of the war. Otherwise, I would have gone to Vietnam. And that would have changed my life drastically, I think.
You talk about having how the Black Panthers in high school, the Father Groppi, or in your days in high school, the Father Groppi movement was going on. Did you have any interactions with Groppi?
Not personally, but a friend of mine, Pat Cannon, his dad was the judge, and they lived in Wauwatosa on Wisconsin Avenue. And they were doing the marches, fair housing marches back at the time, and I think they went 200 days of marching. Groppi was a leader, and they would go, my friend's father, the judge, was a member of the Eagles Club, and at the time the Eagles Club was whites only. And I mean, this is in 1967, 68. Can you imagine that he still had stuff that was whites only, and So they would come and they would protest around his house. Just because, first of all, it got national attention, you know. Groppi was his parents actually had a store on the south side, a grocery, Groppi's Groceries or whatever it is. He grew up here, became a priest. He was kind of worked with Vel Phillips a little bit, but they were a tremendous influence on the whole city of Milwaukee, I think, as far as the black situation here. And it was a good thing, but it was strange because when I was kind of going through it, we were too young and we were more just spectators, you know, watching, and we weren't joining in, you know. I think if that had been 5 years later in my life, I would have been joining in and marching with them. Instead, at that time, I was more watching than joining. So.
Yeah, so back to college. How'd you end up joining in on these protests against Vietnam? I
did. I marched in a couple of marches that they had. Like I said, UWM didn't have that many. In Madison, they would, you know, they actually were putting tape on the windshields of the cop cars because they were getting so many broken windows and everything else. I mean, it was a big deal in Madison. So I was up there a couple of times in some of the stuff. My brother would go up just to protest, walk around in Madison. I think what happened in especially in Wisconsin is once the bombing occurred in Madison, they killed one of the custodians in there, or one of the maybe it was an instructor. But anyway, it really put a damper on all the protests for a while. So everything kind of calmed down after that. And then you had Kent State, you had all these different things that occurred. And like I said, it changed politics to the point where, you know, Lyndon Johnson decided he wouldn't run anymore, and you know, there are a lot of different things that happened that the war, I think, was the beginning of a division in our country that's now very divided. So.
Sure. And at that time you were also starting a business. What was it like starting a business in that economy in that time?
It was a strange time to start a new business because people didn't even know what exactly it was. Once they realized what we did, we painted office furniture right in the office. Once we realized that they could do it, then they saw that it was really worth doing. So it really flourished. It went pretty well. Then things changed because it's kind of like if you owned stock in the buggy business and then cars came around. You know, I mean, the offices changed from being all metal to being a lot of plastic, and instead of painting files, you know, like files that you have for stuff, it's all sitting on your little computer. So that computer would be about 15 files that I would paint in an office. So anyway, then we switched to doing even outside stuff, and that call box back there for the police, we did those for the city of Milwaukee. We also got a contract to do the mailboxes from the post office. So we painted the blue mailboxes. But it went well, and then it got to the point where I had a lot of competitors. Most of them came from me, so I kind of ended up going off, closing the business, and actually like fixing the machines that were used to paint, because I knew how to fix them because I had to after working with them for so long. So I don't know. It kept us going for 40 years, so I guess it was all right. So.
During your early life, or your young adult age, 20 to 25, how did it work? Were you studying and working, or were you working mostly?
Yep. I was working pretty much almost full time in the summers, and then what I would do is I would set up my classes so that I could have them, almost all of them in 1 or 2 days, and then I would work the rest of the time. And it was fine because, like I said, I wasn't sitting there saying I had to have this credit or these credits or this course or this course. So I could take, and I would take, in order to be in school, you'd have to take at least 12 to 15 credits to be considered a full-time student. So I would always take that many credits each year or each semester. And by the time I was 25, I got married. In fact, it was my birthday. I got married on my birthday. So, and that wasn't really a young age to get married back then. I think a lot of my friends were all married right around the same time. We ended up having 5 kids, which back then, I guess it was a little bit more than normal, but not crazy. I mean, now it would seem like a lot of kids in a family. But like I said, I came from 8 kids, and Peggy came from 9 kids. So families changed, as time went on. So
you got married at 25. How did you guys meet? Was it through college or was it?
I actually knew Peggy from high school on, freshman year. We never went out with each other. We always had mutual friends. And then Peggy went to Madison, and I went to UWM. And I think my sophomore year, or between freshman and sophomore year, Peggy stayed in Madison to work, and I ended up going up there during the summer just to have some fun. And we ran into each other, and we started seeing each other, and then we just stayed together. So, but we knew each other, which was just kind of strange. We did know each other since freshman in high school, and we didn't really go out until sophomore in college.
Was that a common thing at the time, to marry people that you knew from high school?
Some did, not maybe 1 or 2 or 3 that there were a couple that probably were together long time and then they got married. Maybe they're together in high school and then just kept it up. But a lot of my friends once they went to college, and they went someplace else, if they were at UWM, I had friends at UWM, and they kind of stuck with their people that they were in Milwaukee, obviously, But when the other guys would go to other schools, then they'd meet somebody there, and they'd end up marrying them. But I ended up marrying someone that I knew, most of my life, or since freshman year. But I think when I look at it now, most of my friends got married around the same time. Most of them had a kid or 2. I had one friend that had 9 kids. I think we had 5, and that was probably more than most of the other ones. It was funny to go through that because once I got married and then our kids grew up, it was like they were going through this again. And I would go to Marquette High for parent-teachers for my kids, and I'd sit and talk to the teacher because it was somebody I had. So we hardly ever talked about my kids. We just talked about old times and what used to be, and so luckily they all did pretty well, so we didn't have to worry too much about going to parent-teachers conference.
So, when you started when you started to raise a family, this job that you had over like the course of 4 years, was that like your income source? So this was,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
everything?
Well, yeah, and then Peggy, my wife, she was a speech therapist, and she worked for MPS. So once the kids were at a certain age, once Mary, the baby, was in kindergarten or whatever, then Peggy went to work, and then she worked, obviously, ever since. So she worked for 30 years or whatever it was. But we needed both of our incomes to make it, to make it work. And we had the 5 kids. 4 boys went here, and Mary went to DSHA. So Peggy went to HA. It wasn't DSHA. It was HA back then. In fact, I think were you the last? I think she was the last class, or second last class at HA.
How was it, because both parents at one time were working, how was your relationship with your kids, while working?
Well, we made a concerted effort to make sure that someone was home till, like I said, Mary, the baby, was in grade school, so that, Peggy still works. She would actually watch kids, so I think it didn't affect the relationship with the kids so much, because when they were in school, we were pretty much Peggy was in school, so we mostly had somebody home all the time once they were in school or out of school. And her being a teacher, she would be off summers, and so it all worked out that way. I, on the other hand, was, working. Most of my jobs originally were at night, because we would go in after the offices would close, and then we'd paint their furniture. So, but I had to do stuff during the day also for the job, to get it prepped and ready, and get the paint, get all this stuff ready. So I was gone more often than not. So I think it all worked out pretty well. I'm glad my kids went here. I think it helped them.
So they didn't give them like a not a representation, but just did the school know
who they were?
Your family had this strong connection to Marquette for years. Did they have that? Did they have expectations? Well, not through me, because it was so far away, but they had expectations, I think, through the different cousins, people that knew who was related. Like, sometimes you don't even know, with a different name you wouldn't know, but some of your cousins would be in your class, and the teacher would have no idea that, oh, that guy is your cousin, So I think there were some expectations from me to my brothers, my younger brothers. There was a little bit from my oldest brother, Mike, who went here, to me. There were still some teachers around who remembered my older brother, and I think they expected me to be somewhat like that. My younger brothers, they ended up all knowing, he was, Tom was your brother, and they were, they played football, they did all the same sports that I did, mostly. They were better than I was, but I think there was some expectations. And at Marquette, it would be both according to sports and grades, how well you did and what you did. And when I look at it, it's amazing when I look at my our kids, we had the two boys went to Madison. We had one that went to Penn. We had one that went to Columbia, and the other girl, Mary, went to Madison. So they all got good educations. They all ended up with at least a master's degree. We've got one's a PhD, and one's a canon lawyer. One guy's a hapless Marquette High teacher. And one is in real estate, and one's a social worker. So it's a whole, group of different people. But I think their base was good. I think they had a good foundation, and being at Marquette helped all of them, I think, tremendously. So.
How would you say their experience was different from your experience at Marquette High?
Well, first of all, their friends were, I said we were far out when I said where we lived. Well, their friends were, you need a passport to get to some of their houses. I mean, Marquette has such a broad circle. Now they go all the way out to McQuanago, and they're all over the place. So I think they had a broader base of friends as far as a different mix. Otherwise, I don't, you can say you guys have all this very good and nice equipment and a lot of things that we never had, But I think the basic is still there, and it's the camaraderie, it's the teachers, that really care about the students. The one thing you guys might be missing is you don't have as many Jesuits. I mean, we used to have a lot of Jesuits. A lot of them were not priests yet; they were misters,
So
but they were Jesuits.
So were the Jesuits actually the teachers of the school? Most
Yep.
teachers were the Jesuits.
Yep.
Did you have any interesting experiences with teachers?
I had a few, yeah. My freshman year, I had a bad freshman year, I guess. I got suspended. I had 40 demerits my freshman year. I ended up breaking one of my teacher's arms. Indian wrestling, which was not a very good thing.
So did they punish you for that?
Well, what happened was, it was before class. It was the last class of the day, and we were arm wrestling. They don't have the desks that they used to here, and the teacher came and said, "Well, come on." He wanted to get the class started, and then he said, "Well, Cavanaugh, you wanted to do that for your grade?" And I looked at him and I said, "Okay." And after school, everyone left, and we had an arm wrestle, and we were just doing it, and something happened. I mean, it was a weird thing. And his arm just snapped real quick, and he stared at me and said, "You broke my arm." And I didn't believe him. I thought he was crazy. But anyway, he said, "Go get a teacher." So I went and got another teacher, and then I went to football practice, and as I was walking out, I had to get dressed, get my uniform on, and as I was walking to practice, they were taking him out to the car, and he ended up having a broken arm and a cast on his arm. And,
Was that just all that was just like a funny haha?
well, it wasn't funny. It was funny.
At the moment.
Yeah, and it was funny, when I went to class the next day, we were supposed to have a test, and the kids all clapped because he couldn't give us our test because he had the arm, so they clapped, and that wasn't very good. But I wasn't punished for it. I mean, it wasn't something that. Obviously, the teacher shouldn't have done that. Obviously, I shouldn't have done it either. But anyway, that was something that was a little strange, something that doesn't happen all the time, I guess. The priest that gave me my 40th demerit died that year, not long after he did that, so I always thought I killed him. But I always kind of got along with the Jesuits. They were pretty good. We had kind of a funny class ahead of us, and it got so bad that when they left, the priests of the Jesuits said, "All right, they kicked a whole bunch of students out of school so that they wouldn't have all this turmoil going on in school." So, you've always got some crazy guys that are always in trouble or making noise and stuff like that. Well, they ended up saying, "All right, you're out," and they kicked maybe 15 kids out of our class.
Was it just that they were like the troublemakers of the class?
Yeah. Well, troublemakers or could be troublemakers, or they were just trying to avoid the problems that they had before. And it wasn't just our class. They did it to the sophomores and the junior or the freshmen also, just to get rid of some of the kids that were causing trouble. So that was interesting, because those are usually some of the funniest guys that you've got in your class. And I mean, obviously they're not funny to teachers, but some of them were, friends, and you could understand why they got kicked out for the most part, because they were troublemakers. But
and then how did that experience? How did your I already asked, but my dad was the first one to go. Marquette High. Was his experience the same? Did you feel that he was getting what you were getting?
I thought he was getting better, a better experience, simply because there was more here. But I still think it's still a similar experience. I mean, in the long run, the bottom line is, you've got teachers that care, you've got kids that better care because their parents are spending a lot to get them through here. So it certainly is. It certainly works out, and I think I think it's a good advantage, a great advantage for you guys to be going to school here. But you had to get in. I mean, that's not a given anymore. So more power to you. Let's hope you use it.
As you're raising a family and throughout your entire life, what has been the most significant change to Milwaukee?
In Milwaukee itself, I think it's gotten to the point where Milwaukee used to be like a real blue collar town, and you would either be you'd work factories, you worked a lot of different places, or you'd have a career, you'd be a lawyer or whatever, and there was a pretty clear cut. You were usually a Democrat or a Republican. A lot of it was, if you were richer, you would be a Republican. If you were poorer, you'd be a Democrat. That's just the way it was. What I see now in Milwaukee, not only Milwaukee, but in the United States, there's no ability on either side, it seems, to compromise on anything. And I hate to say this, but I think we've had it easy compared to what you guys are going to have, because I wouldn't want to see what government's going to look like in 20 years, because I think it's going to be a mess. I think the change is it's losing its ability to have everyone come together and just live as a society. I think we're kind of tearing each other apart, and you're gonna see people going back to stuff that it took, I think, 100 years for us to get rid of. There's going to be people that are going to be white supremacists, and they're going to be a lot of things that I don't think are good, and I think that they're going to get worse.
So since most of Milwaukee was a blue collar city, how well would you guys say like you know each other? Like, did you guys would go? Because it's a good stereotype now that like a lot of people like Friday you go off to the bar after you're done working.
Sure.
Does that grow just connections all over the city?
No, but you would have, and if you look at most of your neighborhoods, they all had their neighborhood bars, and they would have, people that would actually go from the factory, they go right over to the bar, and they would sit in the bars and stuff like that. I don't think that goes on so much anymore, but I think it used to be people would work hard all week, and then they would go and they would have as much of a good time as possible. And I think a lot of it was it probably still goes on, but not on the same level that it was before. You don't have the strong unions you used to have. You don't have a lot of things are different in the workplace. I mean, nowadays you got a lot of people that don't even go to the office to work. They work from home, which would be a whole nother way to exist, I guess. But that's what's going on now for a bunch of people, and I think that's a little different. The blue collar was more of the division, I guess. I mean, if you look, there were a lot of factories. They said Milwaukee tooled the world. They had Alice Chalmers. They had Briggs and Stratton. Well, they still have that, but not very much. They had, just a lot of these big worldwide companies, and people worked. They went to the factory every day, and they worked, and that was their job. And they were getting good pay, and enough to handle, to do a family and to buy a house and everything else. And within 20 years, most of that all shut down. And all those people that were on this lower tier, that were making a very good living, considering their educational level, that was all gone. You couldn't find jobs on that level. So now you've got bottom and you got top. You don't have the middle as much.
How did people in your area deal with that economic struggle and kind of losing all of those?
A lot of people left. I mean, in fact, a lot of black people came up north because the jobs were very good up north, And Milwaukee had a thriving population, although because of, terrible laws, they were all segregated. In fact, we still have one of the most segregated cities in the United States. But you could come to Milwaukee, you could get a job that would enable you to have a family and buy a house and make a living. And all those people that were here and those jobs left, they didn't get another job. A lot of them either left and if you look now, our population has gone down. The city of Milwaukee County has gone down for the last 10, 15 years. It's been getting less and less. And now it's happening all over the place. I mean, factory jobs aren't prevalent in very many areas anymore anyway. But it used to be, that's why I was talking about the blue collar stuff, because it was a lot of people that would be working, every day, and they would just be working on punching a little thing that would move something in one spot to another. I mean, it was just factory work. And they would get paid, and everything worked out. So, and they don't have that now. So, like I say, it's more of a, you don't have the middle class as much. It's more of the upper class than the lower class.
So do you think Milwaukee's more of like a white collar city now compared to being blue?
No.
Or do you think that
It's blue. It'll never be way up there. And I wouldn't say never, and I won't say it anymore because, in two weeks or in 2 years, somebody will invent something and it'll be a whole nother industry and it'll be something everyone does and something everyone needs, and who knows, it'll just happen. But for right now, I am of the belief that you need, in our society, the way it's set up, you should have a lower, middle, and upper class so that you have the ability to improve your lot. So you know that if I work hard, I can go up and I can maybe do better, and I can do this, and I can get up and do better. And if you don't, you're going to be like a banana republic where you've got the poor people and you got the rich. And the poor people do most of the work, and the rich live off the poor people, I think. And there's no ability to go from top to bottom. And I think that the United States is getting to that point, and that's, I think, is a sad thing. But like I said, I think it can change. So we'll see.
All right, let's take 2 minutes.
You gonna ask the question?
So,
yeah.
back to your family, like, how often did you guys like travel outside Milwaukee?
We didn't travel very much at all, but every year we would go up north. Truly up north, we go to Manitowish Waters, which is straight north, 300 miles. We went with my wife's family. So we had, I think there were 26 cousins, you guys. They're in different cottages. We had 4 or 5 cottages. Each family would have one. And so the cousins got to, grow up together, actually, and they got to know each other, and they were on a lake for a week. And every night we would have dinner at a different cottage, and we would move around, and they would do a lot of different things up there. So I think it was a great thing to get up north, and to me, it's always been like a sacred thing. We've done it, I think, every year since '74. I have, and Peggy was doing it since she was a kid. So you guys had the benefit, I think, not so much you guys, but your dad and his brothers and sisters know their cousins so well, because they actually were, for a week during the summer, they were all together. And some of our best times, I would think, would be right around going up north. If you look at our pictures or anything else, it's, a lot of it is from vacation, and it's such a beautiful area too. So it's something that's probably every one of our kids or any one of their cousins would talk about. If you asked them, they'd say, "Oh yeah, we would go up north every year." Like that was an important thing. So
good. What was it like in the COVID area for you? How did you feel about it?
COVID changed. It changed us to the point where, we didn't get together as much with our friends as we normally would. Obviously, we still would do it family-wise, and that's a lot of people right there. So for us as a family, just an immediate family, there's grandkids and us, it'd be 24 of us. So that's a lot of people. But I noticed that, our friends, we're all still friends, everyone still is together, but we used to get together a lot more often. And then it just seemed like that slowly ended up not even happening, because it was just too much work, you know. So for 2 years or somewhere around there, things changed, and I think they haven't gone back yet totally. You know, people still don't have the parties that they used to, or get together like they used to, and I think it's COVID is still kind of the cause of it, or I'm hoping it hasn't changed totally where that's the way it is. I think it can get back, but it's changed. It has changed. I think COVID changed it.
Cool. So, is there anything else that you would like to add that we may have not covered in our interview?
I guess I was saying to somebody that when I think of the changes that have occurred from when I was born, where we actually didn't have a TV because not everyone had TVs. They didn't have color TV because it wasn't invented yet. To now, I think, wow, imagine the change that we've seen. I mean, computers weren't even a thing. It wasn't even considered. And I think of all that, and I think, wow, it's just everything's changed so much in that time span. And then I look at you guys, and what probably took a decade for us, 20 years or so, is happening in about 2 or 3 in your guys' time. So you're going to go through changes that I bet I couldn't even imagine. And that's what happened with us. When you think about, well, just computers. I mean, they didn't even exist. You know, I mean, they had supercomputers when we were kids, and they would fill a whole room. That's how big they had to be efficient. And now you got it on your phone. I got more on my phone than I had on, you know, probably the first computer that our kids had. It just blows my mind that goes on, and it's going to get progressively worse, or not worse, better. You know, I mean, you guys are going to see changes that'll probably blow your socks off. So I bet you don't hear that term very often anymore.
All right, well, thank you for coming and talking to us. This is
Okay.
awesome.
Usually when I get called down to Marquette, it's not for a good thing, so that's good.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Good job, you guys.
So